My discipline is psychology. So to start the semester, I'm going to review research findings from the field of psychology with regard to thinking. Thinking is the mental manipulation of internal representations of objects, activities, and situations. That's the definition in psychology of thinking. So it's mental manipulation. That means inside of us, we change around representations that we have of objects, activities, situations, people, ideas, concepts, etc. There are several elements of thinking, and basic is concepts. A concept is a mental category. A mental category. It groups objects, relationships, activities, abstractions, or qualities that have common properties. An abstract idea is generalized from particular instances. Abstract means there's a quality apart from the object that can't be pictorially represented. There is something more than the object itself when it's abstract. Concepts are the building blocks of thought. In addition to concepts, we have prototypes, which is a representative example of a concept. Most people, if you ask them, tell me a bird, in New York City, the classic or the most prototypic bird might be pigeons, since we see a lot of them. Other parts of the country would be a robin or a sparrow. I know in Texas we had sparrows everywhere. So that's a prototype. Propositions are made up of concepts and they express a single idea. And then a very important element of thinking is a cognitive schema. Sometimes they're called schemes. A cognitive schema is a structured framework or a plan. It's an integrated network, mental network of knowledge, our beliefs, our expectations, the scripts and how we're supposed to respond concerning a particular topic or aspect of the world. Schemas are mental models of places, gender, cultures, organized around a way of perceiving and responding to these situations. For instance, we have gender schemas. Gender is a constructed idea of masculinity and femininity. So whether you're aware of them or not, you carry around a whole idea as to how someone is and how you respond to that person according to their expressed traits of masculinity or femininity. Or if you say fast food restaurant, a whole idea, a whole network is constellated by that. You know how you walk in, you know how you're going to sit, you know where the napkins are, the ketchup, all of that. That's a schema. Okay? An important question about thought is how conscious is it? Some of it's pretty conscious. A lot of it isn't. Freud was the one that told us that, we are like an iceberg. 90% is below the surface. I'm not sure if that's true, but at any rate, we do have subconscious processes. Subconscious means that it's below threshold. It's not immediately in our conscious awareness, but you could easily bring it up. If I ask, say for instance, right at this moment, you're not thinking about it, but as soon as I ask, what's your phone number? That will come into consciousness. When we operate without thinking, we can do multiple tasks. So being able to walk and talk and chew gum at the same time indicates that many of those activities are below our conscious threshold. So those would be subconscious processes. We also have non-conscious processes. Non-conscious remain outside of conscious thought, and they do influence us. There are certain kinds of non-conscious processes that we will never be aware of. For example, tell me the last time you were aware when your hair was growing. You're not. You know your hair has grown. One day you wake up and you say, time to get a haircut. But the actual process of it is outside of our possibility of awareness. The same thing with neurons firing or digestion taking place. We usually know when digestion is not happening, but we're not aware when it is happening. Or the blood sugar levels, and we don't know how those are regulated. And yet we are completely, they have a strong impact on how we are. Mindlessness is when we make decisions or act or speak out of habit without analysis. Now, this can be efficient, just like subconscious processes make for efficiency. However, they can lead to errors. And we keep people from recognizing when a change in context requires a change in behavior. Doing things automatically. Sometimes the situation is changed. They look to these kinds of problems when things like Chernobyl happen or tragedies occur, where you were driving through an intersection you always drive through, and there was a car coming that you hadn't paid attention to, things of that nature. Creative thinking there's two types. We have multiple types of components of creative thinking. There's something called a mental set, and we use procedures that work before. But this can interfere when problems call for fresh insights and new methods. Oftentimes people are like amazed that Einstein was 25 or 26 when he developed the theory of relativity. Actually, if he hadn't developed it by that period of time, it probably wouldn't have come from him. We have different types of intelligence. There's something called fluid intelligence, which is before the age of 26, 27. And that's when we are combining new types of information, seeing new kinds of possibilities. After that, we get habituated into a certain way of doing things. And at that also same time, we begin to have an increase in what's known as crystallized intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is where you put together all of the different ways, all of the new information that you had coming up before the age of 30. Crystallized intelligence is, I don't know if it's to make us feel better or what, but it's called wisdom when you're older. So there's also something called convergent thinking, which is contrasted with divergent thinking. Convergent thinking is where we want to have a single correct answer. You converge on the center point, on the center answer. Divergent thinking is when you explore unconventional alternatives. This enhances creativity. Divergent thinking. Sit down and come up with as many possibilities for the use of a tennis ball as you can. Taking ideas and using them in ways not previously expressed. That's what art does, isn't it? Formal reasoning involves algorithms, deductive reasoning, and inductive reasoning. Algorithms are formulas that produce a correct answer. That's what an algorithm is. Deductive reasoning, if the premise is true, then the conclusion must be true. All humans are mortal. Jane is a human. Jane is mortal. So if the premise is true, the conclusion must be true, because you go from the general to the specific. Inductive reasoning goes from the specific to the general and can only be expressed in probabilities. This is what science is. Let's say Jane. Okay, let's talk about Jane again. Jane has a healthy diet. She exercises 5 times a week. She doesn't smoke. She doesn't use other types of substances that might be detrimental. Jane will live a long life. We don't know if that's true. That might be true, but Jane may have a hereditary disease that's not yet diagnosed. Jane may be in some sort of an accident that wasn't foreseen. So we can say that going through these procedures of healthy living might extend your life. We can't say they will for sure. That's formal reasoning. Now, informal reasoning is where we have heuristics. Heuristics are rules of thumb. Rules of thumb. If you are a woman, I don't know if this is true for men, but if you're a woman and you're shopping for clothes and you don't have time to go into the dressing room to try something on, you're buying a skirt or a pair of pants, you take the waist and put it around your neck and have your 2 fingers meet. If your 2 fingers meet, then the skirt or the pants will fit you. And that has to do with the proportion of your neck to your waist. The same thing, shoes. You take a shoe and put the tip of the shoe at your wrist. On the inside of your elbow is the heel, and that forearm is the size of your shoes. That's your foot size. So these are heuristics, rules of thumb. Also, in terms of informal reasoning, we have something that's called dialectical reasoning. And dialectical reasoning is where you take opposing facts or ideas and you weigh or compare them in order to determine the best solution. This is what critical thinking is about, dialectical reasoning. Now, the first person to investigate how thinking cognitive processes develop was a man named Piaget. And he looked at the stages of cognitive development from birth till about 15 or 16 years old. He was the first one that gave us this kind of research. It was thought prior to him that children are just short adults and that they think and process information in the same manner as adults. This, in fact, doesn't appear to be so. Now, he gave us the terms assimilation and accommodation. So assimilation is when you bring a new experience into already existing schemas. If you're a Star Trek fan, then you know the Borg, you will be assimilated. That's what Piaget said before the Borg actually came on the scene. Assimilation. Instead of changing or altering your schemas, you just take whatever information and you apply it so it works in your already existing schema. Accommodation is when you change an existing schema because of new information. This is the key to developmental change. All right, so for instance, if I have a schema that bodybuilders are selfish, narcissistic, boring people, that may be my schema. So a friend calls me up and says, listen, there's somebody I'd like you to go out with. I think you would be a nice couple. So I go out with this person, and the next day the friend calls me and says, well, what'd you think? And I say, wow, he was so interesting. He's really smart, and he was very interested in what I had to say. We had a great exchange. He was terrific. And my friend says he's a bodybuilder. What are the probabilities that I am going to change my schema of bodybuilders? Sadly, the probabilities are very small. What we have a propensity to do, a tendency to do, is to take this new information and make it the exception. So this is an exceptional bodybuilder. I don't have to change my biased view or my negatively biased view of bodybuilders, and I can still have this person be special to me. Very convenient, but stunted in terms of growth and development. Piaget started us out from 0 to 2. That was called the sensory motor stage, and certain kinds of the way we process the world at that time is through motor. We run into things and then we learn, not a good thing. Then we move into the pre-conventional stage. Then there's the concrete decision making, and then there's concrete operations, and then there's formal operations. And he believed that by the time a child is 15 or 16 years old, they have the ability to have abstract reasoning in the same way that adults do. The research that's followed after Piaget has found that he thought less of children than he should have, and in a certain way, and he thought more of adults than he should have. Most adults don't begin the process of dialectical reasoning, abstract reasoning, until their late 20s, if at all. Some of the quotes on your syllabus indicate there's many people who have come before us recognizing that adults don't do a whole lot of dialectical reasoning. What they said by he misjudged children was at the early stages. He thought that they were not as capable, say, at 0 to 2 as they in fact turn out to be, but they're not as capable at 15 that he believed that they were. So do we stop developing our thinking abilities at the age of 15 or 18? No. And two researchers, Kitchener and King, looked at, based on some work by another researcher named Perry, to look at adult stages of development. And they've identified 3 stages of adult development. The first stage they labeled pre-reflective. And the person who is at this stage assumes that there's a correct answer that always exists. There's one truth out there, and the way that you get it is you find smart people who know that truth and then believe everything that they say. They rely on authorities or what feels right at the moment, or they said so on TV, so it must be true. This is pre-reflective. Why would they name it that? Well, because there's no contemplation of what the data is indicating. The information simply is sucked up like a sponge rather than processed and examined. The next stage is quasi-reflective. And here people do realize that some things can't be known absolutely with true absolute certainty. And they also think that any judgment about evidence is purely subjective. This is the realm where everything is opinion. And they make the error of saying, without stating it, every opinion is equal. Well, this is far from accurate. What this kind of thinking leads to is complacency. The way to eliminate complacency is by making decisions. To think, well, that's just how you see it. Okay, we'll agree to disagree. It's as though both sides of some argument, or four sides, or seven sides, have all equal weight. They don't. Decisions based on sound critical thinking, decision making is the opposite of this type of complacency. Opinions are the start of critical thinking. The working out of that opinion is the process. So opinions are groundless without critical thinking, and you need to have opinions to begin the process of critical thinking. Starting today, begin looking at opinions expressed. Are they equally valid? Do the reasons for coming to that opinion, are they based on what? Are they based on, well, advertisers told me, or my mom told me, or some radio or television talk show host told me, right? The next stage is reflective. And this is where we want to be. This is what this class is about. A reflective thinker understands that although some things can never be known with certainty, some judgments are more valid than others. Reflective thinkers understand that some judgments have more supporting evidence, are more adaptive, they're more complete, they're more reliable, they're less biased. And in this category of reflective thinking is what I mentioned before, dialectical reasoning, comparing and evaluating opposing points of view. This is what juries are supposed to do, what voters are supposed to do, how we determine what's best for improving schools, how you decided to come to school at NYU as compared to someplace else, how you decided to take on academic endeavors. Those require dialectical reasoning. Most people do not attain reflective reasoning. Most people don't. I know that sounds like a terrible thing, but what's our hope and chances? Well, first of all, there has to be a desire, and also higher education moves people from ignorant certainty toward intelligent confusion. And this is a major step forward. It is a good sign once you start in this class. It is not uncommon to be very confused, not knowing what to think, questioning things that you never questioned before. While it may be personally uncomfortable, it's a very good thing, because your paradigms, your schemas are being tested with new information. What are you going to do? Are you going to just assimilate the information, or are you going to take the brave and courageous step of beginning to accommodate the information, accommodate your schemas to include the new information?